I'd like to welcome you to Truth of the Spirit. I'm Patti Brunner, and today's guest is Father Philip Scott. Father Philip is a priest who evangelizes 10 months of the year, and 2 months of the year he works in his ministry in the middle of the Amazon in Peru. And so I'd like you to hear this wonderful message that Father Philip has for us today. He spoke at a retreat for the Arkansas leaders at Subiaco Monastery recently. And so I invite you now to listen to this beautiful teaching by this gifted teacher.
But one thing I know is this. My hope, my situation began to change interiorly when I stopped wanting this can't be happening, the kidnapping. This is a dream, this is a nightmare, I'll get out of this. Pushing it away in my own humanity. As long as I did that and resisted what God had allowed, not willed, but what He allowed, as long as I resisted it, I was a wreck inside. I was destroyed. But the moment I said, and I yelled insincerely, fiat, everything changed interiorly. So I think that's the first step to come to the water, is to say fiat. What we face day to day. Now this you can only learn experientially, not just in our heads. This isn't to be read. You need to experience how good of a parent God is and how well He wants to parent us. But He must bring down our own human efforts to survive. They have to come to nil. But the first step to come is to say fiat. Because there we're beginning to give God what the only thing we can give Him. What do you give someone that has everything? Everything. He has everything. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every sunset, every cloud, everything is His. He created us. He created the universe. But there's one thing He doesn't have. Only we can give Him our trust. That's the only thing we can give Him, is our trust. And we're going to move. We're going to talk. How do you move from distrust to trust? How do you move from anxiety to peace? Because that's part of the water He wants to give us. Whatever is our thirst, whatever we're longing for. So the coming to Him, but the truth is He's really coming to us. We think we're waiting for God. He's the one who's waiting for us. In the tabernacle, 24/7. There you have literally behind the doors, and this is another thing that I've learned through the years, that behind the doors to the tabernacle is another world. There's no fighting. Imagine one day on this planet Earth without sin. Just one day.
I'd rather stand still.
Imagine that. Just what would that look like? You're right. You know, Christy, you're right. You're right. We can't imagine it. Imagine. No lying, no sins, no corruption, no abortion. Just one day. Only love. We're describing heaven. And actually it's not even heaven, because heaven, that's not just the absence of sins, it's the overwhelming, eternal, infinite presence of God. But behind the doors of the tabernacle, that's what's there. There's no fighting, there's no addictions, there's no discouragement, there's no fear, there's only infinite divinity. And that's what we have to realize. And every day I finish the Mass, I kiss my tabernacle and I tell Jesus, you know, I live here. This is my address. So life is basically about returning home, on earth as it is in heaven. And to begin to live and breathe and drink that atmosphere. Now there's also another experience that I don't want to forget. If I do forget, please remind me. There is a time in the spiritual life where it's Jesus who asks us, like he did to the Samaritan woman, for a drink. Or he wants to lay his head on ours. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. It isn't just that he was poor and he didn't own a house. No, he's looking for a heart to lay his heart. We're called to abide with him, but he wants to also rest in us. That's another experience. And I will also discuss Revelation chapter 3. Please don't have me forget. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears me, I will come, sup with him, and he with me. There's two different experiences. Where we sup with him, the Eucharist is overall, but then where he sups with us, which is really a mystery. So the coming to him, the waters, to meet whatever we're thirsting, what we're longing for, has to become with fiat. Is there something in my life, you might ask, that I'm resisting, that I haven't said yet fiat to? Is there an area, a topic in my heart that I'm complaining about, that I've lost my joy over, that everything has become really murky? Is there something that has occupied my mind and my heart more than God? Any topic. And it can be something small. Compared to God, it's small. The other day I had an experience as I was raising the chalice. My spiritual director said, okay, Jesus gave you that experience. You need to ask him why. I raised the chalice at Mass, and suddenly I saw, and I don't know if it was within or without. Within me or outside of me. Maybe it was both at once, because God is really good with his camera. His special effects are awesome. But I had this experience, and it's like time stopped. And what it was is I saw fire, love, light coming out of the chalice. And it was going state to state. From where I was at the altar, occupying the whole United States. But then continent to continent. It didn't stop there. Then it went galaxy to galaxy. And there wasn't a space that wasn't occupied by love, by himself. Now, as I prayed about it, it really was overwhelming. What he showed me was this. There's no place, no situation that he's distant from, that is far away, that is outside his reach. And there's no situation that is difficult for him. Now what that has done now for me, it's giving me a lot of hope. It's giving me a lot of hope. So, this coming forward and going away from what is dragging us down, weighing on us, distracting us, crushing us. Because there's a lot of things in our life sometimes that crush us, and we can't get out underneath it. Is there some stuff like that we have? Is there something in our life that we feel so beaten down that we think about that more than we do Jesus? Is there something? I'm asking you. I've met people in life. I don't know if you remember, I met a woman who I have a photograph next to my computer in my home, who is one of the holiest people I've ever met. She slept for the first time in her life in college, in a bed. Her mother never called her by her name. Would call her bastard bitch. Her father she got polio as a youngster, lost her ability to see and talk. Both returned. She had to learn how to again talk. She would walk without shoes in the snow to school. And And eventually they began to realize her home life was obviously very bad. Well, let's speed forward the cassette. And she was named the Teacher of the Year. She was named Teacher of the Year in her district up north, and is a saint. Is a saint. And one of the last retreats I gave this year, or a retreat that I gave, I had the honor that she was at that retreat, and she asked me if I could have breakfast with her. And for me, I was the honored one. And I mean that, to be in her presence. And I'm not exaggerating. So what can make someone where God emanates, and the same thing can make someone turn hardened and to do and make life miserable for people? And some can go through similar things. But one became a saint, a holy person, and the other one became almost inhuman in the way they lived. And I think it's by what we accept or don't accept. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's a struggle. And I'm not saying it's easy to say fiat. It's not easy to say fiat. But this is where I ask Our Lady to take over when things are difficult to accept. For a 3-year period, I had a situation where a bishop of mine before, he was like a pit bull, and he was threatening, if he could, to close my community and take me out. And I basically, everything visibly, and what I heard and what I felt, the curtains, these things going down. And I had to get to the point where I said, I'm sick of living in anxiety and fear, because it's a living hell. But how do I get out of this state? And that's where I asked Our Lady, every day, move me, take my hand, and don't allow this to become bigger than God. You move me. I don't want to lose my joy over this. And every day I would examine my day, and I would realize I've had joy because Our Lady did it. Our Lady did it. And yes, it was kicking and screaming. So, part of this is choosing, by the grace of God, to give to God something that finally we can give Him. Trust. But we need to be made very small, very vulnerable. And this process is based in Matthew 18:3. Unless you change and become like a little child. Like little children. You will not enter the kingdom. But I want to say with that, not just you will not enter the kingdom will enter you. So it's a process of learning how to live as a son, a little boy and a little girl. Because this stuff we're facing is too big. Way too big. So, like I mentioned, the beginning of the coming is finally saying fear. Fear. And it usually is a stepping, a mortal jump into air. Because you don't see God, especially in suffering. Suffering blinds you. Psalm 6 verse 7 in the Spanish translation says, suffering blinded me. So suffering blinds us. But you know, if Peter, in Matthew 16, after Jesus announced, on this rock I will build my church, you are, okay? And then he tells Peter, you are confident on this church, rock I will change. And then he says, the Son of Man will be, remember? Suffer, die. rejected all that. And then Peter, what did he say? Lord forbid. God forbid that this happened to you. And then this is where we have to remember. Jesus says to Peter, you are thinking, he says first, Satan, get behind me. You are thinking as men. Now, this process of God making us holy and belonging totally for Him and having His kingdom enter us and how to live no longer as an orphan, but as a favorite son, it's a process that we don't understand. I don't understand it. I don't even like it. But it works. Because it's His way. So, first of all, I'm not saying that we're going to understand it, at least initially. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Isaiah 55:8. Nor my ways your ways. And it's a path that usually is done in the dark. It's done in the dark. And one of the most painful things of this process of learning how to come to Him, where do I come? I can't even see you, God. What direction? Up, left? Do I stand on my head? What direction? Now, I know with the tabernacle it's right in front of us. But how do I get in? When it's dark, that piece of the Eucharist looks like a brick. It's cold. Right? Have you ever prayed in the Eucharist? Seems like a brick. Anybody ever had that? You don't seem like a loving presence there. You seem like the real absence of God than the presence of God, although He's there. And what I've learned with little by little with time is, do not put too much stock in what I'm feeling or thinking or understanding or perceiving. Proof positive. The Eucharist, if I bang it, it sounds like bread. If I weigh it, it weighs like bread. It sounds like bread. If I taste it, all my senses says, my eyesight, this is bread. But the fact is, it's the creator of everything. It's the infinite and immortal God. It's nothing, bread, it's not. It's anything but bread. It's God Almighty. So what my senses perceive and feel and hear in times of especially that are so difficult, I don't put too much stock. I acknowledge it. This is what I'm feeling today. But I put my trust because you're trustworthy. When you do an exorcism, the demons are telling you, we're not leaving. They're mine. And everything in that circumstance shows there's no way out of here. So the negative thinking, the fears, that's diabolical. That we go through in crises. And I always run to Mama. Because there's one voice you and I know her son will not deny. So especially those circumstances, and this is what I would tell Our Lady. I want it to be obvious, that circumstance with the bishop, that there seemed to be, and he kept asking me to look for a new bishop. And nothing pointed to a bishop was going to accept me. I was promised, but they didn't keep my promises, their promises. So nothing seemed to be a way out. So I just said, Mama, make it obvious that it's your son that's going to do it. Because there's no human solution to this. And I was given to a January 1st. And if not, it was curtains. And soon before that, the bishop got sick and he had to retire. I didn't see that coming. And when I would pray about it, I kept hearing in my heart, everything is fine. Fear not. Everything on the outside said, it's curtains. And the Lord kept saying, everything is fine. Fear not. Everything on the outside, what my senses perceived, what my feelings felt, was, it's curtains. And Jesus was saying, no, everything is fine. Fear not. And it turned out that way. So how do we move from the thirst of now, what we're facing? First of all, whatever we're facing has to bring us to the Lord in prayer. But a type of prayer that is not just vocal, that I cry out my needs, but one that I learned to, in Isaiah chapter 30, wait in trust and wait on the Lord. Isaiah 30, in returning and in rest, you shall be saved. The word saved also means healed. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. How do I quiet my heart in crisis? And return to that rest. Isaiah 30:15. Because you can wait but complain. You can wait and become a monster to live with. Right? You can. You can be in a bad mood. Nothing's changed, but you're furious and you're angry and you let everybody know about it and you're impossible. See, that's not what we're talking about, that wait in that rest. And there's a real lesson to live and to learn, should I say, to learn how do you rest, wait in an interior rest. Especially when the circumstance hasn't changed. But the change has happened in here. That's his goal, is to change us. Because that circumstance is going to change. Whether in this life or the next, it's going to change. It's temporal. But the change in us has an eternal value. It's preparing us for heaven. And you can see in your eyes, in your face, has this so much, what I'm facing, has it taken away my joy? I mentioned this woman. She has the most gentle eyes, love, unbelievable. Let me tell you another woman. I gave a retreat, I'm not going to say what country. It was in Europe. A woman came to me and she said, I've never told this to anybody, but she said, my mother gave me away. My grandmother took me in. Then my grandmother couldn't take me, so she gave me back to my mother. And my mother had me be raised in a house of prostitution. I was the first person she ever told that to. She was screaming as she was telling me, wailing. She finally was able to tell someone. That's part of the problem of being unable to come to Jesus. We've never been able to unload on anybody and haven't had a loving, wise, listening ear. Loving, wise. And a wise person is someone who has worked through their own issues, that they understand how God works with humanity, with the human heart. Wise, loving, listening. One time in South Korea, giving retreats in South Korea, I got a word of knowledge that there was over 3,000 people. That there were women there that had been used in World War II by the Japanese. They were survivors of being sexual slaves. And God wanted to heal them. The translation came in Korean. At the speed of turning the lights on, that's how quick, the whole place started wailing, screaming, crying. They wailed, screaming, non-stop, 15 minutes at least. And all at once they died down to peace. They had never been able to express their pain. So sometimes God allows such difficult things in our heart that is like being run over, because He must connect our head and our heart. That's so important on the human process. What do I mean by connecting our head and our heart? That I feel, I let myself feel. This is healthy human life and home life. I feel, I can let myself feel, and I can share what I'm feeling. That's intimacy. I feel, let myself feel it, and can share it. And that's what lacks most in family life. There's some families that have an elephant, a huge situation at home, and no one talks about it. And it's bigger than life. But they're angry at everybody. They're angry at themselves. They hate themselves. They hate each other. Because they've never said, ouch. They've never been able to say, ouch. You know anybody like that? Anybody know anybody like that? Situations like that or not? Or is it only Peruvians that are like that? You know, they feel, they can allow themselves to feel, and they can share what they're feeling. I had a situation the other day. Homeschooled family. The father living a secret life for 20-some years. Had a son out of wedlock. This affair. No one knew about it. The bomb was dropped. I met with the mother and the children. They couldn't talk. I mean, there was something that was very painful. They couldn't talk. So I asked them, and I helped them to put words to their pain. That's the first time they had been able to say it. And it happened months ago. No one talked about it. So this coming to Jesus does not exclude the natural, the heart. It isn't just prayerful, spiritual. Pray the rosary, you'll come. No. God respects our human natural process. In fact, you cannot come really healthily on a spiritual level if you cannot describe your heart. Feel and share what you're feeling. Even if it means I'm angrier than a wasp's nest. God respects, we're not angels. He respects our human nature. This is all part of coming to Jesus, who's very aware and understands our pain. You know why we have such sexual schizophrenia? Craziness? Because we never dealt with our heart. When the heart, which is the sexual organ, is not allowed to feel and put words and share it, it eventually explodes in the sexual. Goes bananas. That's what we have.
You've been listening to Truth of the Spirit with Patti Brunner and our guest speaker, Father Philip Scott. To find out more information about Father Scott, I invite you to check the website, patriarchministries.com, where we'll list some information about him and ways to support his ministry. I invite you to continue to listening to Truth of the Spirit. Subscribe, it's free, and keep watching or listening at your special device. And remember that there's more. With the Holy Spirit, there's always more.
This is the Padua Podcast Network. PaduaMedia.com.